Hello, welcome for today's mathematics lesson. And today we are going to talk about integers. An integer. We shall begin by the definition. We are going to define an integer. An integer by definition is any whole number that is positive, negative, or zero. So we are saying here that any whole number that is positive or negative or a zero, then it is an integer. For example, you can have positive numbers. Positive numbers, you can begin by 1, 2, 3. You can number them up to positive infinity. They form part of integers. We also have negative numbers, -1, -2, -3, name them up to negative infinity. They are also integers, and together with 0, 0 is also an integer. Now remember that the fractions, the decimals are not integers. We are only dealing with whole numbers. So we are going to look at some operations on integers. Operations, you know them: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. One on one, I'm going to begin by addition of integers. Addition of integers. On addition of integers, we are going to have different integers being added: positive to negative, negative to positive, positive to positive, and negative to negative. We are going to see what happens. I'm going to begin by adding a positive integer to a positive integer. So, adding a positive integer to another positive integer, the results will be another positive integer. What are we saying? This is simple to understand. An example: take any positive number, add it to another positive number, you will get a positive number. The simplest example can be 1 plus 1. 1 is positive, 1 is positive. The result is 2, and 2 is also positive. Number 2, on addition of integers, we may have a negative integer being added to a negative integer. What happens when you add a negative integer to a negative integer? The result will be a negative integer. For example, if I take as the simplest examples, -1, I add it to -1, the result will be -2. So a negative integer plus a negative integer, the result will be another negative integer. Part 3 of addition of integers, we may have adding a positive integer to a negative integer, or a negative integer to a positive integer. So what do we get? So say that adding positive integer to negative integer, or vice versa, Vice versa means now we are adding a negative integer to a positive integer. What do we do? We subtract the smaller number from a larger number, and the result is given the sign of a larger number, and the result is given the sign of a larger number. Positive plus negative or negative plus positive, you take the smaller number, subtract from the larger number, and then the sign of the answer will be the sign of the larger number. For example, if we have a number, say 16 plus minus 1, what do you do here? We are saying subtract the smaller number from the larger number. The answer is 15. And then the result, we give it the sign of the larger number. The sign of the larger number is positive because 16 is our larger number. Another example, we can take negative 1 plus 16. Simply take the larger number, subtract it, the smaller number, and then the result, we give it the sign of a larger number, still positive. What about negative 16 plus 1? The same thing, smaller number, subtract it from a larger number. So 16 minus 1, 15. Then the sign is given from the larger number. The larger number is 16. So the sign will be negative. So that is how we deal with that. I hope it is understood. So we are going to look at subtraction of integers. Subtraction of integers. To subtract integers. Subtraction of integers. On subtraction of integers, we are going to have two scenarios. When you are subtracting integers, you are going to have two scenarios. The first scenario, if the first integer is greater than the second integer. First integer is greater than second integer. That is the first scenario we are going to consider. So, on the first integer being greater than the second integer, if positive integer is subtracted from positive integer, the result will be positive. Positive minus positive, we are saying here that the result will be positive. That is only if the second integer will be less than the first integer. For example, we can take any example where the second integer is less than the first integer. So that is, say, 30 minus 10. 30 minus 10 will give you 20, which is a positive integer. The second scenario, the second scenario. If before the second scenario, we still have a negative integer subtracting from negative integer. So if we have negative integer subtract from negative integer, the result will be a negative integer. That is also if the second integer is less. For example, we can have negative 16 subtract negative 3. This is the same as negative 16 plus 3, and the result is negative 13. So negative is negative because the second integer is less than the first integer. Second scenario, if the second integer is greater than the first integer. Second integer is greater than the first integer. Second integer is greater than the first integer. Part 1 of it, we are going to have a positive subtract a positive. The answer there will be a negative. That is, if the first integer is less, then the answer will be a negative. For example, if we take 30 minus 40, for example, the answer will be negative 10. The second part of it, if we have negative integer subtract negative integer, the answer will be positive. Negative integer subtract negative integer, the answer will be positive integer. That is only if the first integer is less than the second integer, or rather the second integer is greater than the first integer. An example there, we can take a simple example, say negative 20 subtract negative 30, because negative 30 is less than negative 20. So this is the same as negative 20 plus 30, and this one gives us negative, not negative, but positive 10. Positive 10. Positive 10. That is all about subtraction of integers. You're going to have multiplication of integers. Multiplication of integers. On multiplication of integers, there are simple rules that are going to help us to understand multiplication of integers. That is simply positive multiplied by positive, you get positive. Positive multiplied by negative, you get negative. Negative multiplied by positive, you will get negative. And negative multiplied by negative, you'll get positive. These rules are going to help us. So whenever you get a positive number multiplied by a positive number, the result will be positive. Positive, negative, 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 positive, positive, and the negative times negative is positive. That is simple to understand. For example, if you are given negative 1 times negative 1, that is negative times negative. The answer is 1, positive 1 now, because negative times negative is positive. On to division of integers. Division of integers also has the same rules as multiplication, where positive divided by positive, you get positive. Positive multiplied by negative, divide by, you'll get negative. Negative divided by positive, you still get negative, and negative divided by a negative, you'll get positive. Also, those rules are going to help us when we are dealing with division and subtraction, division and multiplication of integers. Then lastly, we are going to look at combined operation on integers. Combined operations. On combined operations, we have positive, negative, multiplication and division, both combined in one question. When that scenario happens, we apply the rule called BODMAS. BODMAS. BODMAS means bracket of division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. Bracket of division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. So, for example, if you have a question like 2 minus 5 times 10 plus 1 divided by 2, you'll start by division. There is no bracket, there is no off. You start by division. 1 divided by 2 is 2, so 2 minus 5 times 10 plus 2. Then you go to multiplication, that will be 2 minus 50 plus 2. Then you go to addition, 2 plus 2, 4 minus 50